Okay, so before I get into the actual, Dreamweaver program, which you guys are going to be using for, putting your website together, an actual functioning website, there is something I need to show you to understand how HTML thinks. And I'm in Photoshop, so this is not anything that's actually going to be a website. I just kind of put all the pieces in here that would be here, right? So I have my header bar up here. I got 3 buttons. I just created these in Photoshop real quick. They're JPEGs. And then I have a whole bunch of text, right? So these are the things that might be on the front page of my website. Now in Photoshop, this is really simple. I just take this from somewhere and I copy paste it, put it wherever I want. These 3 items right here, there's all sorts of alignment tools where I can say, all right, I want these to all be, in the same space, vertically, and I'm gonna, sort through them so that horizontally they're all evenly spaced, shifted gallery a little bit to the left. So there's lots of tools to just intuitively move this stuff around. With the text, I can make the box bigger just by dragging it. I can select all the text and make the font bigger. It's real just easy, point and click. But when you're putting stuff on a website, you can't just drop stuff in there, right? That's not how the program thinks. This is not how any HTML thinks, right? So in order to get things to work properly, I can't just drop the header in there. I have to create a box around it, right? I would create a box called a div. It's just div. And that div will hold, right, this image. Now, in this case, the div could be the exact same size as the image, but I need a box to hold this image in here, right? The same with these buttons. Each individual button is going to have to be, that's interesting. Sorry about that, bit of a technical glitch. But each of these buttons needs to be in their own little div, right? They're going to be in their own little boxes. I'll explain why in a second. But in order to keep them lined up in the same space, they're also going to have to exist, all 3 of them, inside this other box. And each of these individual boxes, we tell them, all right, this one you're going to float, to this side, you're going to float to the left. This one you're going to float to the right. And then this one, I can't tell it to float in the center. There's actually nothing that says that. So what I say is, all right, also float to the left, minus 50 pixels in order to offset it by a certain amount. I also have to tell this box right here that you have to be, 600 pixels, which that's an arbitrary number I'm choosing. I would do the math and figure out how big I need it to be. Right, but I have to tell this outside box you're going to be 600 pixels. Tell this one float to the side a little bit. Tell this one float to this side a little bit, and then tell this one technically hang to the left, but stick 50 pixels in between these two. Right, so you have to put these in these div boxes because it's the div boxes you tell where to go. It's a lot easier to tell a div where to go than an image. This text also all exists within its own div. There's also, just to make things interesting, within a div, there's information in here that says, well, this paragraph starts and stops here, this paragraph starts and stops here, and oh, by the way, there's, 3 line breaks in between these 2 paragraphs. I have to say that specifically in the code. I can't just hit the enter button 3 times, right? I have to type in a little bit of code. Technically, that code would be, I think there's a slash there, but it's just a little bit of something, and you stick it in there, and you'll get that break. And this is to say nothing about the fact that if you have a background color, that's going to be in the code. There's a lot of different places where we have to organize stuff. But the main thing to keep in mind is that everything has to be within its own container. Now, that's a lot to take in. And to say nothing of how everything has to get written. So, what I've done and what I've sent you is sort of a template. Right? I have sent you 2 different ones. You're going to use the one that just says template, not the colors one. And it's already got the basics in there. And you're going to use this to build your own website, because as you can see, that's a lot of typing. That's a lot of HTML, which this is not an HTML class. We don't have time to learn all of this. I'm going to show you some of the more basic things, the fundamentals, so you can know how to troubleshoot, and you'll be able to enter in your own stuff. Now, template colors, which is the other one I've sent you. I've opening Chrome. There we go. So I made this one with those div boxes I told you about. I gave them a background color, right? So everything else is identical between this one and this one that doesn't have all the salmon color in it. It's identical except the div boxes that exist in both, I gave them a background color here. So you can see what's going on. So you can see what I mean by these 3 buttons must exist within this box. Now, why don't we see anything behind here? Well, because the box and the artwork are the exact same size. We don't see any secondary boxes around the word bio or gallery because those boxes are the exact same size. You can see all this text exists within one box. And then I have said, you know, put some breaks in here. This is a separate paragraph from the second one down here, but they all exist within the same box. And you can see down here at the bottom, I've got a little bit of a footer. Everyone has a different footer, but mine is just, you know, copyright me, and here's my contact information with a little bit of a web address. Mine, these divs right here, you can see they go the whole length of the page. I did not specify how big these should be, right? This div is specified to the exact size of the header picture. This div right here, I've called it, I think, 800 pixels. And then this one is, I think, 700. I specified precisely how wide these should be. I didn't do that here, which is, I wanted to show you this because it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that I didn't put any, you know, information on here about how big that should be. I hope I didn't turn that volume up too much. We'll turn it down a little. So if you don't tell this to kind of center itself necessarily, you can end up with stuff way out here and you'll wonder, why is it all the way out there? Well, the div is that big. So if you want to say have your buttons reiterated down here just as text and you want them lined up and not too far apart, then you have to tell the div down here to be a certain size. All right, so I want to show you how you can change out these images to match yours, because the first assignment, it's the second to last assignment we have in this class, it's your first Dreamweaver assignment, is to just make your template page, right? Get your header in here, get your buttons, whatever they're going to be in here, and, you know, maybe fill in some, you know, filler text here, but, you know, each of your pages is going to be different. But coming up with your footer as well. And because once you do that, you can save this page, and then you can do a save as and call it gallery, and we can put our gallery in the middle, or you can put your contact information in the middle. Doing all that, making all your separate pages, that's going to be your final project. You're going to have a couple weeks on it, and it's you don't want to try your gallery yet. You want to just get the template page done. All right, so first things first, how do we change out the images, right? Now, you'll see as I click on these, it highlights a different section of the code. And this is the big long string of code that you need to stick an image in there. You can see that it's saying the image source is this particular folder. I'll go over the folders in a minute. And then it specifies the width and the height. It does that automatically. Now, I don't expect you guys to type this all out, and you don't have to. Dreamweaver has a very interesting way to do this. You simply click on it here, and you're going to see there's these little 3 lines right here. This is like a menu of options for this. And if I click on it, this comes up, this little box, and I can barely see it. And there's a few things in here, including you could title this, you know, maybe I want it, if someone's hovering over it, if their eyesight isn't very good, it could say bio. And the voice on their computer will say the word bio, and they'll know if they click there, they get my biography. Under source, though, the SRC, you can click on this folder and you can change this. So I can say, well, instead of the bio button, I'm just going to pick button, right? And so I say OK, and it changes out one image for the other. I can do that with any of these. I can change this one to, I'm just going to change them all to the button, right? And it's going to alter the code for me. I don't have to, worry about figuring that out. It's going to change all the things down here in the code to match up here. All right. So that would be your first step, is just going through and replacing the source image with one of your images. And I'll teach you guys how to make that organized well in a minute. The second thing you're going to want to do is make sure that they look correct, right? If your buttons are bigger or smaller, your numbers up here need to be different. The way this is set up, and right now I'm in split, which splits between the intuitive, hey, this is what my website looks like, live preview, and the actual HTML code. So those buttons, I called them, if you look in front of where the image is listed, you can see ID equals bio, ID equals gallery, ID equals contact. I named the containers that hold these images for a reason. I named them because if we go up into it's different colors now, we're in blue, pink, and yellow code. These are the style sheets. This is the, in HTML5, your bottom half is going to be, you can see it's these colors, it's mostly blue and purple, and some of this red. All this specifies is what's there. This image, this image, this image, this text, this email link, that's all that's down there mostly. And then everything is named, ID email, ID copy, ID welcome, all of it's labeled. And at the top, you'll see there's a little like hashtag bio, hashtag gallery, hashtag contact. That's where you specify, oh, these are this big. 125 by 140, float left. 125 by 40, float right. That's where you specify how big these things are and where they go. And unfortunately, there's no way to simplify this. This is the simplest code I can think of to complete this site. So, and you can see under gallery, that's the middle button. That's where I said, well, float to the left, but make sure your left margin is 110 pixels, which will shove it to the middle. So if your buttons are bigger than mine, you may have to change some of these numbers. You may have to say, okay, but the container needs to be 150 by 50 pixels because that's how big your container is, or your button is. Well, how do you know that? Well, you have to go into Photoshop or Illustrator, whichever thing you made it in, and you have to open up that button, and you have to go to image size. And it will specify right here, dimensions, 125 pixels by 40 pixels. Ignore the inches. Inches are irrelevant. This is all about pixels, right? So you have to know how big your images are. You have to go into Photoshop and you have to look at that. You have to find that out for yourself. The other thing you might have to change is this hashtag menu. That's the, oh, whoops, I got rid of it. Let's go here and preview it there. There we are. That's this box, this outer box, right, that is holding all three pictures, or all three menus buttons, right? That's what hashtag menu is. And that one, I have it set to a width of 600. I was wrong about the 800. It's 600. If your buttons are bigger, you might have to say width 700. And if I do that, let me scroll up here. There we go. Oh, for heaven's sake. There it is. All right. So I can see my three buttons. I can see my menu. I can say, okay, make that 700. And you can see it spread them further apart. I can do it even further. I can say 800. Right? Now they're even more far apart. Now, of course, the question is, this is no longer in the middle. Right? This is called brute forcing it, where you do something in a very direct way. It's not elegant. There are more elegant ways to code this, where this will always float in the center. But we do not have the time nor the expertise to do that. So all I have to do is say, okay, well, I need more than 110 pixels on my margin here. And so I might say 150. Nope, not enough. 170, still not enough. That looks about right. Actually, it's probably supposed to be closer to 200. And I just keep typing in numbers until I get it right. You will have to retry and retry and retry different numbers. I know some people get frustrated with that, but this is how this works. And this is very much like, it's like any kind of coding, game design. animation, any of these things, you have to try and retry and retry. You can't, it's not going to come out right the first time. And one of the things I'm going to be grading you on for both this template and the final is whether or not you were able, like you went back in and polished things up and made these changes. Because if you just let this sit here back to where it was, that's where it was before, and say, well, I needed more room because the buttons were bigger, but I didn't really know which number to use. That's not an excuse, because you gotta sit there and change some of the numbers. Just make sure you're not getting rid of any of these semicolons or these colons, things like that, these brackets. These are all very important that you leave them in there. All right. While we're on the subject of leaving in all the syntax that needs to be in here, I said before that everything is contained within divs. If we look at this line right here, it says div. Actually, no, that's a bad example. Yeah, okay. So it says div, and then ID equals contact, and then there's a little closed caret. So that's the start of the div. And then there's all the image information. Image is here, and it's this size, and it's this height, etc., etc. And then you see this caret slash div, and then a caret. So anything with a slash is ending the thing you started. So this part right here starts the div. There's blah, blah, blah information about what's in the div. And then this section right here closes it off and finishes it. Same for the one that's for the menu. There's a div ID here for the menu, and then there's nothing after it. And then you got a new div ID, div, and then those three are closed off. You can actually see when I highlight one, it highlights what's closing it. Highlight that, goes over there. Highlight that, goes over there. But this one is getting closed off after all three of these, right? Because that box, if we go back to our example here, these three little boxes are all contained within this bigger box. And what that looks like in code is that you've got 3 lines of code here in between the opening of the div and the closing of the div. You have the same thing with paragraphs. I said before that you have to specify different paragraphs. Well, this paragraph of text starts here, text, ends here. This paragraph starts here, blah, blah, blah text, ends here. The div for the whole thing starts here. You have paragraph 1, paragraph 2 with a break in the middle, and it ends here. All right, so your assignment is going to be to start with my templates and use that to create your own website. Now you might be thinking, well, mine was lined up a little bit differently. I had, my boxes were over to the side here and things like that. At least get started while you're outside of class. Like, get your images in here. Get these buttons created. Most of you created these in InDesign. You're not going to be able to use those. You have to recreate them in Photoshop or Illustrator, either one. And you have to save them as 3 separate images, not separate layers in Photoshop, not separate layers in Illustrator, not separate, artboard. Each one has to be its own separate file when you save it, right? And so get your stuff in there, start to collect all your images and other things you're going to put in, and then when we're in class next week, I can go over with you specifically how to make your stuff look maybe more to what you had in mind, right? But you need to at least get your stuff in here and start to get that settled. The other thing that you're going to need to do, I'm going to go to my desktop, and I know my desktop is a mess. I apologize. Whether it's on your desktop or your flash drive, you need to create a folder that says my name site, right? I have one here that actually has my name on it. It says my name site. And in there, opened here, it's been storing the files I'm working in. Those are the files you saw from me before. And images, right? You need to, if you want to start from my files, actually, you can rename this one. You can rename it to your last name site. But you need to have a folder that you're working from. You can't just take a couple files off the email and then, make your own site. Why is that? Well, because websites deal with links. You saw here in Dreamweaver, it says image source equals images/buttons.png. Well, it's saying, where are the images found? Oh, in images, / meaning inside the images folder, buttons PNG. That's where it's finding it. If you have your site in this folder, and then your images are in some completely different folder, it's not going to be able to find it when you move all this stuff online. You have to keep everything contained. We've been saying this before for a lot of other projects, whether it's Premiere or After Effects. This one, more than all the others, needs to be contained in one folder. You have to stay organized. If you're sending me examples of your site and it doesn't have all this information, that is not going to work, right? So you need to make sure you keep everything in one place and that you keep these working files too. All right. Once you do that, once you get everything in a folder, you are going to have to do something called manage site. Now, because I think if I start a new project, no, I have to close this project because my project looks different than yours. No, do not save changes. Yeah. Oh, I still can't trigger it. Yeah. You're going to see a button under this Files tab right here that says Manage Site. And you're going to have to click on that. I have to use the drop box because I don't have that button anymore. And you're not going to have anything here. It's going to be blank. It's going to say Your Site's nothing. You're going to have to say New Site. And you have to choose a folder. I'm going to find the one that says My Name. Here we go. So I select that folder. And I'll call it, I don't know what I'll call it, New Site. That's a terrible name. Hit save, and it's going to show up in the Your Sites list. And then when you say done, right, now what it's done is it's put you in that folder. And any images that you put in that folder, so if I move a copy of these things into the My Name/site folder, they will show up automatically in Dreamweaver. You might have to press the refresh button. There we go. So now all of the information that was in there is showing up in here. So that's another way by which you have to stay organized. If you don't get that figured out, we can fix it. It's not like if you don't do it the first time, it's it's permanent. But you have to have all of your stuff. This, let me just open this here. This here with the header and the bio and the gallery and the contact, that information is not inside this file. That's why the file is so small. It's 3 kilobytes. It's still these separate image files. So you have to keep everything with you. Otherwise, you lose work. All right. So what you're going to do is you're going to use my template that I've sent you to insert your own buttons. Make your own buttons. Do not use mine. Obviously, you can't use my header. You have to use the one that you created. And you're going to insert your header. You're going to insert these things. Whatever you want to have on your front page in terms of written word, you want to put that in. If you're planning on having images, we'll work with that later. But the main thing is getting your stuff in here and set up. All right. The last thing I will say is that in the folder that I'm sending you, there's this basics document. And this is just some basic terminology for what you're looking at, right? So divs are used within the body here. They're actually used anywhere. But this is where most of your stuff goes, is in the body. The style section, right? The height, the width, all that jazz. Float left, float right, margins. That's all in this style section, which is part of the top part. So just to give you a little insight on what things are called. The last thing I will say is that, yes, you are starting with my code, but that is the perfect way to learn HTML. And the other perfect way to learn it is to be Google searching about it, because that is how people remember the syntax. If you don't do this every day, you're never going to remember all that technical stuff. So get used to looking things up.